In northern Maine, where dense forests hide the world from human eyes, lies a small lake known to locals as Ghost Lake. Its water always seemed unusual. It reflected the sky even on cloudy days, and on windless days the surface was as smooth as a mirror. People shunned the lake, fearing rumors of strange disappearances and unexplained events that occurred on its shores. This story begins in the summer of 1989, when four friends, Lisa, Eric, Jason, and Sarah, came to this area for a vacation. Their goal was to explore a lake about which they had heard many mysterious legends. They dreamed of writing an article for the school newspaper and making a sensation that would bring them fame. The old lake house where the friends were staying looked ominous even in the daytime. Its dilapidated walls were covered with mold stains, the floorboards creaked with every step, and huge spiders lurked under the roof. Around the house grew thickets of wild grass that seemed taller than a man. The locals called the place the Hunter's House, but no one knew exactly who the hunter was or where he had disappeared to. Lisa, Eric, Jason, and Sarah had come here for more than just a vacation. They wanted to solve the mystery of Ghost Lake, about which there were so many strange rumors. On their school bulletin board there was a notice about a contest for the best report, and the friends decided that their article about the mystical lake would be a real sensation. You do realize we're the first ones to really try to find out the truth, right? Eric said, laying out the maps on the table in the center room of the house. No one's even tried to investigate this place, because all normal people prefer to stay away. Sarah, who didn't like unexplained things, grumbled. And we seem to be the abnormal ones. Or just curious, Lisa objected. She set an old camera she'd gotten from her grandmother's trunk on the windowsill. She loved capturing moments, especially the unusual, and the lake seemed like the perfect subject. As dusk fell, they built a campfire on the shore. The flames burned brightly, reflecting in the calm water. Despite the recent banter, everyone felt the tension. The nature around them was frighteningly quiet. Neither birdsong nor rustling of leaves could be heard. Even the wind seemed to avoid the lake. "I'll tell you what I've heard from my grandfather," Eric began, tossing a branch into the fire. "Once there was a small village on this spot. The people lived a simple but happy life. One day a strange man came to them. He offered to fulfill their every wish, but in return he asked only one thing, that they let him settle on the shore. Everyone agreed, because his request seemed harmless. But soon the inhabitants began to disappear." "Disappear?" Lisa asked, looking at him with interest. "Yes, they were found in the water, but dead, although there were no signs of violence. Just a look. They all died with a look of horror on their faces." "And what? No one tried to stop this man?" Sarah asked doubtfully. "They did. They burned down his house. But that same day the whole village drowned. The lake swallowed them up, and no one ever heard of the men again. The place has been considered cursed ever since." Sarah rolled her eyes. Of course it was. Typical village tale. Suddenly a mist began to rise over the lake. It was unusual. It was too thick and glowed strangely in the moonlight. Lisa instinctively reached for her camera. "It's not an ordinary fog," she whispered, aiming the lens. "Look, it's moving." Everyone turned around. The fog seemed to have a life of its own. It was rotating, forming a funnel just above the water. Then from the depths came a muffled sound, like the ringing of an old bell. It was so quiet that it was more felt than heard. "What the hell?" Jason muttered, taking a step back. No one answered. In that moment, they realized that this place wasn't as abandoned as it seemed. Something ancient and inexplicable dwelt in its depths. The next morning the friends decided to explore the shore of the lake. Lisa took her camera, and Eric took an old notebook to take notes. Sarah reluctantly took a flashlight, and Jason armed himself with a folding knife to pull apart the thick grass. The shore was covered in mud and snags. At one point they came across some strange footprints, deep, barefoot footprints that led straight into the water. Lisa took a picture of them, though Sarah brushed them off again. It was probably just someone fishing, she said. Eric bent down to the footprints and noticed that they were huge, much larger than a human foot. No, it's not human, he objected, pointing at the prints. Look at the width of the foot and the depth. This creature must be incredibly heavy. Everyone felt strangely uneasy, but continued walking along the shore. After a while, Lisa noticed that the battery in her camera was starting to drain, even though she had fully charged it before the trip. This is not normal, she said. My camera can't run out of battery that fast. Sarah shrugged, but felt the air become unusually heavy as they entered the thicket. They found an old boat half submerged in silt. The planks were burnt, and inside lay a book with weathered pages. What's this? Jason pulled it out of the mud and handed it to Eric. That night the friends decided not to go to bed. Eric continued to study the diary while Sarah and Lisa discussed what to do next. The pages of the book gradually revealed words in English, as if written down by someone's invisible hand. Whoever enters the lake will remain in its shadow forever, Eric read. What does it mean? Lisa whispered. At that moment, the lights in the cabin flickered. Sarah went to check the generator, but as she stepped outside the threshold, she came upon a strange sight. Along the lakeshore stood the same blurry figures Lisa had seen in the photographs. Their faces were blank, like masks, and their movements were slow, as if they were sleepwalking. Are those people? She whispered, but no one had time to answer. From the depths of the lake came a mighty roar, as if something huge were moving under the water. At that moment, one of the figures turned and pointed at Lisa. Run, Eric shouted. That same evening they sat at the table, studying the diary. Eric was completely absorbed in transcribing it. His face looked tense and his eyes were burning. He often wrote something down in his notebook as if he was discovering something incredible. Sarah and Lisa were silent until he looked up. It's not just a diary, he said with a tremor in his voice. It's a description of some ancient ritual. It talks about sacrifices made to the lake spirit to keep it balanced. Also, it mentions a tower. A tower? Lisa asked. But there aren't any towers here. They call it the Tower of Mirrors. It stands in the center of the lake. According to the diary, this place is a portal between worlds. A portal? Sarah grinned, but there was anxiety in her voice. Are you serious? Yes, Eric confirmed. And it says that whoever dares to enter the tower may know the truth, but will not return. At that moment Jason, who had been silent until then, suddenly said, what if that's the reason why strange things are happening here? It's like the tower attracts people to the lake. That would explain their disappearances. Perhaps, Eric replied thoughtfully. But whatever it is, I'm sure the mystery is in the center of the lake. We have to go there. Sarah protested vehemently. Are you out of your mind? We've already lost Jason on the beach, and you're suggesting we go straight into the jaws of this place? We need to leave as soon as possible. No, Lisa objected, suddenly backing Eric up. We can't just leave. If we realize what's going on here, we might be able to stop it. After much debate, they decided to go to the boat at dawn. When dawn came, the friends packed up and headed for the old boat they had found the day before. It was creaking and cracking, but it was still holding its own on the water. Eric busied himself with the oars, while Sarah sat in the stern, not hiding her displeasure. Lisa kept her camera at the ready, occasionally looking around. The water seemed frighteningly quiet to them. It seemed that their every movement disturbed the tranquility of the ancient creature slumbering somewhere beneath the surface. As they moved toward the center of the lake, the fog grew thicker and thicker. First it enveloped the boat, and then it began to change shape. Now it resembled moving silhouettes that looked like human figures. It's definitely people," Lisa whispered. The figures moved slowly, as if they were walking along the bottom of a lake. Their faces were blank and their bodies resembled shadows. When one of the figures raised her hand, Sarah shrieked. "She's pointing at us," she shouted. Eric didn't stop. His gaze was fixed on the tall structure that began to loom ahead. The tower was incredibly strange, looked as if it were made of translucent glass or water. Its walls reflected the boat, the fog, and the figures themselves, but the sky above it seemed as black as night. As they swam closer, they saw that a wooden staircase led up to the tower. Lisa was the first to climb up onto the platform, followed by the others. It was dark inside the tower, but its walls gave off a faint bluish glow. They resembled mirrors in which strange scenes appeared instead of their own reflections. Eric, examining one of the mirrored fragments, froze. It was the village. The village that the legends spoke of, he whispered. Images of people, men, women, and children, flashed in the mirrors. They were living their lives, but suddenly their faces contorted in horror. Then they disappeared, as if vanishing into thin air. "It's their souls," Lisa guessed. "They were stuck here." Suddenly another image appeared in front of them. Jason. He was standing in a dark room, surrounded by the same shadows they'd seen in the fog. His lips were moving, as if he were trying to say something, but there was no sound. "We have to save him," Lisa said firmly. "How?" Sarah screamed. "We don't even realize where he is." At that moment, a bright glow flashed in the center of the room. A silhouette began to rise from the floor, tall and inhuman. His body was hidden in the darkness, but his eyes glowed like two glowing coals. "You have come for knowledge," he said in a rumbling voice that echoed in his friends' heads. "But knowledge requires sacrifice. We want to save our friend," shouted Lisa. "What do we have to do?" The creature raised its hand, and an ancient bowl full of black liquid appeared on the floor. "One of you must stay here forever," it said. "This is the price." Lisa and Sarah froze. Eric rose slowly. "I'll stay," he said. "But give us Jason." "Eric." "No," Lisa shouted, but it was too late. The creature nodded, and Eric disappeared in a bright flash of light. The next second Jason materialized in the middle of the room, but he looked pale and confused. He didn't remember what had happened to him. The tower began to shake. The lights inside it flickered and the walls began to crack. "We have to get out of here," Sarah shouted. They rushed down, barely making it back to the boat in time. When they had sailed a safe distance away, the tower disappeared as if it had never existed. 3 months had passed since the events at Ghost Lake. Lisa, Sarah, and Jason had returned home, but their lives had never been the same since. Lisa had abandoned her camera. Now she avoided taking pictures of even the most ordinary moments, as if she was afraid she would see something inexplicable through the lens again. She sat at her laptop for hours, reviewing the pictures from the lake. Most of the photos were smudged, but one of the shots showed something eerie. A tall creature with burning eyes standing right at the water's edge. Lisa knew it was impossible, because she was looking the other way at that moment, but the photo proved otherwise. Sarah tried to pretend that nothing had happened. She returned to her studies and friends, but her loved ones noticed that she was different. Now she kept the lights on all the time, even at night, and avoided looking in mirrors. One day, walking past a store window, she saw her reflection, and next to her, a vague shadow looking back at her from behind her shoulder. From then on, Sarah tried not to walk alone. Jason, despite being rescued, looked broken. He still couldn't remember what had happened to him in the tower, but the nightmares wouldn't leave him. Every night he saw black water, fog, and silhouettes of people surrounding him. Sometimes he woke up with the feeling that someone was standing at his bedside, silently watching. But it was Eric's fate that worried them most. They had returned to the lake a few weeks after they left, hoping to find at least a trace of the tower. But it had disappeared without a trace, as had everything associated with it. Even the shore looked different. The footprints they had found before were gone, and the water seemed dead and cold. One day Lisa received a strange letter. It came without a stamp or sender's address. Inside was a single page, a yellowed sheet from the very diary they had found on the beach. On it was scrawled a single phrase: "I am waiting for you in the shadows. The balance is not yet restored." Lisa felt a chill run down her spine. "It's Eric," she whispered, looking at the text. She showed the letter to Sarah and Jason. They stared at the sheet for a long time, silent and breathing heavily. "He's still there," Jason said at last, "but it's not our Eric anymore." From that moment on, Lisa, Sarah, and Jason stopped talking. They no longer talked about the lake, the tower, or Eric's disappearance. Each of them tried to deal with the experience in their own way, but something was pulling them back together. Sometimes Lisa caught herself looking toward the window at night. All she could see outside was darkness, but in the back of her mind she thought that somewhere beyond the light the lake, and with it the mysterious tower of mirrors, was waiting for her again. The last point was the call from the police. Lisa awoke to the buzzing of the phone, and on the other end was the sergeant's voice. He told her that they had found footprints on the shore of Ghost Lake again. Only this time they belonged to her, Sarah and Jason. The lake was calling them back. Lisa felt that there was no point in resisting anymore. And deep inside, she knew secrets like this would not let go of their witnesses. A whisper in the silence. During the night, Lisa awoke to a strange sound. It was a quiet, barely audible whisper that came as if from a mirror hanging in her bedroom. She stepped closer and froze when she saw black water instead of her reflection. There were figures floating on the surface, among which she recognized Eric's face. He stared at her silently, but his lips moved as he spoke the words. "They are already coming for you." Lisa recoiled sharply, fell to the floor, but when she raised her head, the mirror again reflected only her frightened face. The mystery of Ghost Lake remained unsolved, but one thing was clear. Some mysteries are better left unsolved, for the truth can sometimes destroy those who dare to seek it.